right, well, let's start. Transition to preschool. You guys may or may not know, Matrix Parent Network is, our mission is to empower families of children with special needs to successfully understand and access the systems that serve them. And we want you to become successful advocates and role models for your children. We have a few designations, Federal Parent Training and Information Center, and we service 18 counties in Northern California. As a California Family Resource Center, we service just a few counties, but in the PTI world, the Parent Training Information Center world, we service from 0 to 26 years old. So we kind of have overlap in those counties. And we're also a California Family Empowerment Center serving another few counties in Northern California. And those age ranges are 3 to 22. So we basically serve from 0 to 26, which is why when we do transition to preschool things, we're already working with folks in the 0 to 3, and then you can have some kind of consistency as you enter into preschool and then into the big school, as we call it, when you go into kindergarten. This workshop was developed because of federal grants that we get. As I talked about, we have the federal grants and a couple of state grants, but we're always happy for donations from viewers like you. So if you feel so inclined, you can, when you get the PDF, which you should have, the PDF of this PowerPoint should have come with the Zoom invite. And if you're so inclined, or go to our website, and no amount is too small, really. So who are we? I am Alyssa DeFilippo. I'm Director of Parent Services at Matrix. I came here about 11 or 12 years ago because I thought I would be good at facilitating support groups. And I ended up being hired as an early years parent advisor. I have a 23-year-old who has Prader-Willi syndrome, and I'm happy to talk more about that to anybody who wants to know, because awareness is really key. But she is 23 now. It seems like yesterday she was an early start and transitioning, and I was sitting around a table at the special ed preschool, really not understanding a whole lot that was going on. So I remember that feeling, and that's why I really like doing this training, if I could really help others just have a little bit less of that confusion as you're going into the transition process. Okay, so what we'd love is for you to leave here knowing about the Lanterman Act and regional center services, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, and special education services, the key differences between early start and special education, the IFSP to IEP timeline and the process, how to prepare for the initial IEP meeting and transition to preschool, and of course, as always, the importance of self-care during any of these processes that we go through. Just a little COVID-19 specific information. Since I want to say maybe April or May of 2020, the Department of Developmental Services, which funds the regional centers, which funds Early Start, they have extended the Early Start services so that when schools were not doing assessments, so that they couldn't really transfer once the 3-year-old became 3, it was hard and fast. You end Early Start, you go into the school system. Because that wasn't happening, because assessments weren't happening, and there was this backlog of assessments, regional centers were keeping their Early Start kiddos past 3 years old. That has been extended yet again until December 7th of 2021. Now, different things are happening with different regional centers around the state because of what the school districts are doing. Are the school districts having assessments? Are they able to transition into a preschool? Is it open? Is it not open? So I think things are opening up more now, probably in the past 6 months, than they were previous, but it's interesting that this waiver is still in place. So if you have any questions about that, we can talk about it later, or you can look into it more with your service coordinator at the regional center, but just to know that this extension is still in place. Okay, so to begin with the transition to preschool, we want to educate yourself as to the two systems that may serve your child, the regional center and special education. learn about the eligibility processes, the services, the procedures, your rights and your child's rights under each system. Calendar what happens during the months before leading up to your child's third birthday. Organize your thoughts on paper regarding your child's needs and strengths, including any assessments that may happen or may have happened. Explore the services and the preschool setting that'll be most appropriate for your child's success at school, and prepare your child and you for the start of preschool. So that's pretty much what I just said. And again, you'll be getting the copy of this, so not to worry, or you have gotten a copy of it. So just a little bit about regional centers. I'm not going to spend too much time on regional centers, but there is this split, this fork in the road that happens when your child turns 3, because the services they've been getting have all been coming from the regional centers, unless you have somebody with a low incidence disability, and then it is through the school district. But I didn't hear that, so I'm not going to go into that too much. So the Lanterman Act of California requires that regional centers provide supports and services to individuals with developmental disabilities 3 years old and up. Most of these services from 3 to 22 are delivered by the school districts, not the regional centers. So when your child turns 3, early start ends, and eligibility for continued Lanterman services is not automatic. So now the service that your little one is in from 0 to 3 is called early start. And the service that changes from 3 to life, right, to on up, is called Lanterman services. The eligibility for Lanterman services is different than the eligibility for early starts, and the regional center will draw data from assessments, whether their own or the assessments that are done with in coordination with the school district for transition. It just, again, depends on the regional center to determine eligibility. So in order to be eligible for the Lanterman Act, your child must have a developmental disability that originated prior to age 18 and is expected to be lifelong and constitutes what's called a substantial disability. There are 5 categories that result in eligibility. They're cognitive impairment or intellectual disability, autism, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and this 5th catch-all phrase, the other disabling conditions, that closely resembles an intellectual disability and or results in the individual requiring similar services to an individual with intellectual disabilities. That catch-all, it packs a wallop. And it's the bucket that my daughter with Prader-Willi syndrome falls in. It's the bucket that maybe some, I hate to use the term, but higher functioning individuals with autism might fall in. But anyway, it's the 5th category. That substantial disability that I spoke about is defined as having significant functional limitations in 3 or more of the following areas of self-care, receptive and expressive language, learning, mobility, self-direction, capacity for independent living, and economic self-sufficiency. Now, if that isn't enough, in July of 2021, the regional centers, the Department of Developmental Services and regional centers have enacted something called provisional eligibility for regional center services. If your child is kind of on the cusp of going from early start into preschool, this provisional eligibility may come into play. Again, when you look at the PDF, you could go to this link and you can read all about it. But basically what it is, it expands eligibility for 3 to 4-year-olds to be this, what's called provisionally eligible under specific conditions. There'll be assessments and reassessments of the child at certain points, at least 90 days prior to the time they turn 3. And if they become provisionally eligible as opposed to eligible, then again at 3 years and at least 90 days, provisionally eligible at 3, at least 90 days before turning 5. Then from 5 years old, the child needs to meet the definition of developmental disability to go on to receive the Lanterman services, as were discussed previously, the eligibility, the substantial disability, and all that. In order to be provisionally eligible, a child has a disability that is not solely physical in nature, and that has significant functional limitations in at least 2. Remember, before it was in at least 3. Now we're in at least 2 of the following areas of major life activity. And those areas have also shortened. There are only 5 of them: the self-care, receptive expressive language, learning, mobility, and self-direction. So these are the qualifications for being provisionally eligible. This again might be a little small to see, but it sort of is a side-by-side Lanterman Act eligibility and Lanterman Act provisional eligibility. And again, I don't want to go on and on and on about this, but you can look into it more when you look at the PDF, or we can talk about it more during the Q&A. So if your child is eligible for the regional center, the IFSP is closed and the IPP is opened. That's the individual program plan. The early start coordinator might be your service coordinator and continue serving your family, or you may be assigned a new one. It just, again, depends on the regional center. Sometimes they like to take into account that continuity might be good, but other times it's just hard and fast. They have early start service coordinators and Lanterman service coordinators. There's a meeting to discuss and develop the IPP for your child, and that may include both your child's and your family's needs, and needs determine the goals and the regional center services. You want to make sure that all your concerns and your child needs are in the IPP. That will be reviewed annually or as needs change. An example of services during the school age years with regional centers include respite. There's a pile of money that's there from the state to help parents to hire caregivers who can come in and give you a much needed break. There are agencies that are vendorized with the regional center who provide these people, or you provide your own people and they can sign up with the agency. Family members could do it, a grandparent or a sibling. In my case, we used both grandparent and sibling at different times. Other services regional centers may provide during the school age years, from preschool on up, parent trainings or behavior modification management support. Be sure to ask for whatever needed service you're thinking you might want to explore. Just don't assume that it's not available to you, because it may be. But also know that the regional centers are what's called payer of last resort. So they're not going to pay for a service unless you've exhausted all the other things that might help pay for it. You know, insurance, sometimes Medi-Cal, sometimes some of the military supports that are out there. What if your child is not eligible for regional center services? Well, we have this provisional eligibility as well. But let's say they're not eligible for the provisional eligibility or the eligibility. You do have the right to appeal. You can ask questions, gather information, document your thoughts and communications. Disability Rights California, the Office of Clients' Rights Advocacy, that OCRA, is an office that's set up to help regional center clients with their appeals. If this becomes an issue, we're happy to put you in touch with the OCRA person in your area. We hope that it doesn't and that things go smoothly for you, but we can talk about that at another time. And then also there's an Introduction to Regional Center Services as a matrix publication you can download and find on our website. So we're going to leave the world of regional center services for right now, and the rest of this will be more about understanding special education, because that is where you're going to get the bulk of your services during the school age years. So in the world of special education, you know, we hope that teamwork prevails at all times. Teamwork between parents, among parents, student, the special ed teacher, the regular ed teacher, the school psychologist, the school administrator, and any of the service providers, and any of the specialists who are working with your child. We mentioned the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. There are components to the IDEA, and we're going to go over them just briefly here. We have other trainings that do a deeper dive into this, But just so that you know, as you're entering into this, that it all starts with assessments, that appropriate evaluation piece, because without appropriate evaluations, you're not going to reveal needs. Without needs, you're not going to be able to write goals. Without goals, you're not going to be able to understand what services need to be provided. And without those services, we can't really build a successful program. The IEP is it's a meeting, it's a document, and it is the program. So when we throw around the word IEP, it means those three things. It's an individualized education, LRE, which you'll hear about a lot throughout your child's career potentially. This is the least restrictive environment. It means that education with typical peers whenever possible. That's the inclusion that you might hear, or mainstreaming that you might hear. There are reams of research which shows that inclusion benefits children with developmental disabilities, but then it's really an individual kind of decision. And, for my daughter, we found that it was better that she was in a special day class, a more restrictive environment. So again, a personal decision, but you'll hear the term, the acronym. And then another acronym you'll hear is that free, appropriate public education, FAPE. And we're fond of saying it's not free, best private education, it's free, appropriate public education. And the more you learn to speak in the lingo of special ed, to throw around these acronyms of LRE and FAPE, trippingly off your tongue, the more that the IEP team that you're entering will understand that you have a certain amount of knowledge, and that you're going to be a valued member to the IEP team, and you bring a certain amount of expertise to the party because you know your child best. So we talked a bit about that. IDEA here's a link that you can go to read all about it. There are 13 eligibility requirements. There's a 14th for an established medical disability. Again, I'm not going to go over them here, but we do have an IEP packet online on our website that talks all about the IEP and the creation of it. Good to know that annual IEP meetings are held to discuss progress and make any changes, and you can ask for a meeting at any time if you have concerns, and that meeting should be conducted within 30 days of asking, but you don't want to ask for one every month, right? Okay. And that knowledge is power, that becoming familiar with your child's rights will empower you. So you can check out our Matrix Advocating for Your Child with Special Needs packet that we have on our website. And we also have an advocacy training that we usually start the year off with, and we did this year as well. We had that in September, and we do have most, if not all of our trainings in Spanish and English available on our e-learning site, I guess either through our website or on our YouTube channel. So finally getting to the steps in transitioning. There are a few of them, right? So there are things that happen by 2 years, 6 months, things that happen by 2 years, 9 months or earlier, things that happen around 2 years, 9 months, then things that happen by 3 years and at 3 years. So you can see these time frames and the age of the child and the transition process in our transition from early start to preschool services packet. We also included that in the Zoom invite. So again, if you wanted to take a look at that, things that I'm going to be talking about from here on in are on that chart. So that's always kind of a good refresher to kind of go back and look at that if you're needing a little reminder about where you are in the process. So what happens before your child is 2.5 years old? The Regional Center Service Coordinator will help you to start think about what do you want your child to accomplish during their preschool years? What kind of assessments are needed? What were the services they were getting? Whatever services they were they getting speech? Were they getting OT? Were they getting physical therapy? Were they having an educational service coordinator come to the house and work with your child weekly? Whatever those services were, they should be being assessed in those areas. And what kind of instructional setting might your child need to make progress? Do you think that that might be at home, or maybe in a special ed preschool, or a typical preschool, or maybe a combination of both? It really will depend. It's an individual decision, and it depends on where the child has been or could be successful. And then to know what programs are available and what are the eligibility requirements for those programs. And of course, we can help you with the transition process, and the early start specialists and therapists working with your child are also really good sources of information, because they've worked with your child for however long they've been in early start. So always good to have good relationships with those folks, with the specialists. And, if possible, sometimes they're the ones doing assessing. Sometimes it's the school districts, the new PT, the new OT, the new speech language pathologist who might be taking over for that old one. But having some kind of communication between the old guard and the new guard is beneficial. And if you can't open up those lines of communication, because everybody is really busy, and if you can't, broker some kind of meeting between the two at an IEP meeting, that might be the best place to do it. But if that can't happen because of people's schedules, always good to have at least a one-page kind of assessment, right, of what the speech therapist thinks your child has done, where they've come, what the progress that they've made. Because if that speech language pathologist isn't the one doing the assessing, you at least want to see if they can and review the assessment, the new assessment, just to see if everybody is on the same page going forward. Okay. So there are some key differences between early start and special education. Early start is in the home, right? Special education, preschool, outside of the home. That's a big change, mostly for us, mostly for the parents. I think, the kids they're real resilient, and maybe they're ready. Maybe they're ready to venture out. They might even be ready to jump on a bus. I was, I think, more afraid of a bus than my daughter ever would have been. And I probably held her back from stepping on that bus and going. So one of the regrets I have, but it's not a huge one, but who knows? Try not to let your apprehensions get in the way of opening up the world to your little one, right? With early start, parents are present for sessions. In special ed preschool, not so much. Depending on the preschool and depending on the levels of abilities in the classroom, there may or may not be volunteer opportunities, but I think more than not, you're not going to be involved in any of those classroom activities. With early start, the parent provides transportation if needed. With special ed preschool, the district may or may not provide transportation. That's really will depend. And we get a lot of calls about preschool transportation, and it really just depends on the districts, because in California, preschool, it may be soon, but it's not mandated. So if it's not mandated, transportation doesn't need to be provided. But again, if you have transportation questions, please, call our helpline and we'll help you out. Usually services are a shorter duration, maybe 1 or 2 times a week with early start. With special ed preschool, they're usually 3 or 4 or 5 times a week for 2 or 3 or 4 hours a day, depending on the number of services and what the program is. Is it just, a half hour, 2 times a week of speech? Is that going to be the service? And then they're in a typical preschool the rest of the day? Or is it a language enriched class that is 3 hours a day for 4 days a week? Again, it depends on the assessments, right? What did the assessments show? What is the level of need? What are the goals? And what are the services and the program that are going to speak to those, to advancing those goals? Usually one-on-one services with early start. With special ed preschool, there may be a specialized small group and or one-on-one instructional therapy. You see the group therapy a lot in the area of OT, of occupational therapy. You might have been having individual OT sessions in early start, and when you transition into the school age, OT is sensory issues or anything with OT, they are not one of the eligibilities of special education. So you could be eligible under speech and language, also need OT, And they'll start off maybe with a booster group of OT, and then seeing where the needs are, it could work into being a one-on-one with an OT in a preschool setting. With Early Start, the written document is the IFSP, as you know, and the written document, as we talked about before, is the IEP. So we're going from individual family service to individual education plan, meaning the goals become more education oriented and less outcome oriented, as they are with the IFSP. Which next bullet here focuses on outcomes for the child and the family in Early Start, and it focuses on the child's educational needs and goals in special education. What happens from 2.5 to 2 3/4 year old? So, need a drink. The service coordinator sets up the first transition conference to create the transition plan. It is best practice to have a school district representative present at this first meeting. Your family is included in the development of the transition plan. It must be part of the IFSP and include the program options and the steps and the services. The specialists who have worked with your child will review the program options and the community resources and discuss how best to prepare your toddler for the transition to preschool. So this is a time where, if indeed you can have the specialists from the school district who will be taking over the services at a meeting like this, this is a time when those specialists can talk to each other, and they can the specialists from Early Start can transfer their knowledge to the new specialists. Like I said, it doesn't always happen, which is why it's really nice if you have a good relationship with those Early Start specialists to get that one pager, which just might help to communicate as you go forward. The transition timeline is going to be reviewed during this meeting, and those assessments will be suggested and discussed. And then an assessment plan is created. That assessment plans need to be signed by you, the parent, before the assessments can begin. And then within 60 days of signing and returning the assessment plan, the assessments are completed, and the next transition meeting is scheduled, and that transition meeting is called the first IEP meeting. So during this time, what can you be doing? You can organize your child's records, any assessments that you have, any medical reports, the IFSP. We have a couple of packets on our website called Getting Organized in the Early Years and Getting Organized in Your Child's School Age Years. We found that keeping everything together in a binder and then being able to refer to last year's binder as you go forth into this year's is very helpful. You'll see with the way an IEP is set up is that you'll have goals, and then the next year's IEP will talk about those goals, right? They'll talk about the functional level of performance. So it's good to have the old goals to look at to see how they have performed going forward. So keeping everything in a binder, I kind of got off track there for a minute, but keeping everything in a binder is the important thing, to keep everything together. Think about what areas of your child's development should be the focus of the program. And you can use this worksheet that's, I think, pages 13 to 14 in our transition from Early Start to Preschool Services to help you organize your thoughts about your child's strengths and weaknesses. So here's what it looks, the two sheets look like. I know it's a little tough to see but the skill area talks about language, receptive, expressive, self-help, like dressing and toileting. Motor is gone on into two categories, the gross and the fine. There's social, emotional, and behavioral. Play is actually a category that is a strength, and you might have needs or concerns. You might have goals around. The pre-academic are those skills that are precursors to any of the academic skills that they could be learning as early as kindergarten, but used to be like more in first or second grade in the olden days. We also have the strengths and needs worksheet part 2, where you kind of record what works best for your child, activities your child likes best, how your child learns best, how my child's challenging behavior is best redirected. That's a big one. And things that motivate your child. Um, it's kind of good whenever you go into a new environment with your little one, and this is transition to preschool, transition to kindergarten, transition to middle school on up. If you have just a one-page kind of document which talks a little bit about your child's disability, and if it's something like autism, where a lot of people know a lot of things about it, you don't have to belabor the point. But if it's something like Prader-Willi syndrome, like what my daughter has, a lot of people don't know what that is. So to just give a little bit about the disability and how it manifests itself with your child, and talking about a few of these things. What are the activities they like? How you see they learn best? What's the challenging behavior and how it can be best redirected, and things that motivate your child. This helps the new staff, the new teachers, the new specialists be able to get to know your child a little bit. And you're also providing very valued information to the IEP team. So we can take a look at that, later and at your leisure, but, just a little bit of homework. What happens before your child turns 3? So there's that IEP eligibility meeting. Assessment results are discussed. Eligibility for special education is determined. If eligible, the IEP is then written, and that IFSP is closed. How can you prepare for this first IEP meeting? So requesting assessments and goals before the meeting in writing and nicely is always a good practice to get into. It's a good practice to get into. It is not law that, it's not in the IDEA that specialists get you this information before the meeting. It's helpful, though, for you to be able to review those assessments so you can, go through it with your highlighter. If you get them in enough time, you can share them with one of our parent advisors, and we can help you go through with the highlighter. We can help you uncover those needs and talk about what might need to be a goal. We can help you prioritize what you want to talk about at the IEP meeting. So if you don't get the assessment results in writing before the meeting, you don't have a chance to do that, which is fine. If you can't do it before the meeting, then you just need to, respectfully request that you need a little bit of time to review, maybe after the meeting, before signing anything, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But best practice is to try and develop those relationships, which will allow you to ask for and receive assessments and draft goals before a meeting. We also have requesting brief pre-meeting conversations, which the specialist to ask questions. I found that this was particularly effective going through the school years with my daughter, because she at one point had 32 goals and she had all the services. So our IEP meetings would have lasted for days if we didn't do some kind of pre-IEP meeting. So being able to meet with the specialist beforehand, reviewing the assessment, asking all those questions so you have a better understanding. Then when they present at the IEP meeting, you've already had your questions answered, you're on board with what the goals could be, and it just goes smoother. Now, not always possible. People are very busy, especially right now. Good Lord, everybody is so busy because there's a backlog of assessments. Hence the waiver to keep early start kiddos in early start. But things are loosening up a little bit, and things will get better. And a lot of the things that I'm talking about now are tips that will help you throughout your child's whole school age career, not just during this transition. We already talked about organizing the paperwork. Something we hadn't talked about was just writing down your current observations. We have talked about writing down concerns about your child. There in that, that sheet that we just talked about. I'm forgetting what the name of it was. Sorry. The child's strengths and needs worksheet. There is a part in the IEP where whoever is facilitating it will say, and what are the parents' concerns? If you have this one pager ready to go, those could be your concerns. You could send that to the person who's facilitating the IEP, and that gets put into the IEP, and then you can talk about, these are our concerns. Now, I'm not advocating writing a book. I'm not even advocating writing a long chapter. I'm advocating writing one page, bullet points if possible, right? To just be able to say, this is disability, this is how it manifests, these are my concerns. I know it's hard. Not everybody has a husband who's an editor like I do, because you can edit down my 5-pager into 1 page. But it's important. It's important to get your concerns out there and be able to be a valued member of the team because of what you're bringing forth, your information and your concerns. You want to organize your thoughts. We've talked about that. You want to keep an open mind and remember your child's interest rather than any fixed position you might have. You know, your neighbor's kid might be in this great special ed preschool, and you just think it's perfect and it's done such great things for you know, your friend's child, and you want your child in that class. Well, that class might not be appropriate for your child. It might be a great class, but if it's not appropriate for your child, it won't be a good class for them, right? So it's listening to the assessment results. It's asking the questions. It's understanding what your child's individual needs are and working with the team to find the best services and placement. And this is a biggie, especially when you're just entering into the system, is processing your emotions before the meeting. Even though we know our children best, sometimes reading those assessment reports can be really shocking, and it can stir up a lot of emotions. So if at all possible, give yourself time to process these emotions before the meeting so you can be prepared with the priorities that you want to discuss and be able to not let your emotions get in the way. Now it's okay to show emotions because you care. You obviously care about your child and you want what is most appropriate, right? You don't want what's best. We all want what's best, but the language you're going to start using is what is most appropriate for your child to have them be successful in school. This, of course, speaks to having those assessment reports beforehand so you can review them. So that's one of the things that hopefully can happen. Okay. The actual IEP meeting. What can you expect? What will that initial meeting be like? Well, it'll probably be long. There's a lot to cover. May last for more than an hour. You'll see some familiar faces. Some or Earl of the Early Start team will be there. Certainly your regional center coordinator will be there. You know, I mentioned before we started that I was confused at our first IEP meeting. I did not know why our regional center coordinator was there. Obviously, I wasn't prepared. But I remember that confusion walking in and saying, Reese, what are you doing here? He was there because it was the handoff, but it really, I didn't have a training like this. I'm sure Matrix probably had one, but I didn't go to it, so I wish I did. But they're there because they're handing off. And it's important to make sure that the information and all the early start providers know get handed off to the new providers. So at this meeting, you can ask for introductions for whoever's facilitating. If whoever facilitating is not providing them, find out how much time is allotted, because sometimes they'll say this will be an hour, this will be an hour and a half. You might need to have a second one, you know, if things don't all get done. Take notes or have someone with you who will. A lot of times people bring a trusted friend or some kind of support just to be the note taker so you can focus on being involved and not have to take notes at the same time. Definitely ask for clarification or explanation or specifics. This is definitely essential if you have not seen the assessment reports before and something hits you and you want to jot down your question and ask it. And ask for breaks if you need them, because again, this is new, right? And we don't want to, it's not a sprint, right? It's more of a marathon and you want to pace yourself. Something to remember with as you enter into, well, with any team that you work with the IFSP team, with the IEP team, the IPP team, any team that's going to work with your child as you go through. We like to call it the 3 C's: the communication, cooperation, and collaboration. You know, they're words to live by, certainly in relation to interactions with any service team, like I said, whether health or regional center, and of course the IEP teams. And as parents, we want to be valued members of that IEP team. And we want to learn how to talk so schools will listen, and listen so schools will talk. So we already talked about acknowledging and processing your emotions beforehand, focusing on your child's needs. listening and asking questions, repeating, reflecting, rephrasing for clarification, building on small agreements throughout, using humor and being appreciative, showing respect to the other members of the team, and they will show respect to you, and being grateful and assuming that your IEP team is doing the best that they can. I was fond of saying when I was doing direct service with parents who were calling that, these people in the IEP teams, they're not here because they're amassing wealth and they're going to retire in the south of France, right? They're here because they care about children and they care about your child and the specific needs that your child has. So kind of go in with that attitude and work with that with your team. What do you say? You get more with sunshine than rain. I'm mixing my metaphors now. So what'll be discussed at the first IEP meeting? Well, we already talked about the parents' concerns, right? We talked about having that one page, it not being more than one page. They will discuss the child's present levels and the presentation of the assessment results. So the professionals who evaluated your child in each area of suspected disability, and remember that they should have assessments on any of the areas that they were getting services in, and they might also need assessments on some of the areas they weren't getting services in. So you need to make sure that the assessment plan is as comprehensive as it needs to be. There will be draft goals. The team will discuss areas that need improvement based on the assessment results and observations and review the draft goals to meet by next year's IEP. After goals, there'll be discussion of services, the discussion of frequency and duration of special instruction and related services. The related services are like PT, physical therapy, OT, occupational therapy, speech, could be some assistive technology thrown in there. There could be behavior, some kind of a behaviorist if behaviors are an issue. Talk about the frequency and duration of this special instruction to make progress on these goals. And then the placement. Where are these services going to take place and what will the program consist of? So just a few notes on placement. The IEP team is required by IDEA to review with you the options available for placement to meet your child's needs. There's called a continuum of options. It's usually not just one placement. The school will make an offer of one option that they believe is most appropriate for your child to make progress, but they would have had to consider the continuum of options. And if they only make the offer and only talk about that, you can always ask, were there other options that you considered? I think I remember something like I went to some training and they talked about a continuum of options. Again, good to know the language around special ed, the acronyms and the language, because that allows you to speak in terms that the people who are speaking this language, 12 hours a day, it'll help to have them understand that you understand. And that's an important thing. And remember that the school districts are required to provide that FAPE, free appropriate public education, in the least restrictive environment, the LRE. So what about that preschool program? What are you looking for? What's most appropriate? Options which may be considered include a class with children without special needs with your child receiving the special education related services such as speech outside the classroom. We talked about that. I said, what if the special ed preschool is only, a half hour on Tuesday and Thursday mornings? Well, is your child going to be in a typical preschool the other amount of time? There might be a special education class called a special day class with other children with special needs. That's something more like I pointed out, what if they're in a language enriched program, which is, 3 hours a day, 4 days a week. Your child could also attend both a special education class and a community preschool class, receiving the benefit of both. Maybe special ed in the morning and the preschool in the afternoon, or switched, or different days. It just depends. And there are classes with a mix of children with and without special needs. I think that Maggie was talking a little bit about that with the school that I think her son was in. So it's a good idea to check out the IEP team's recommendation before agreeing to the placement. The school district personnel will arrange visits before or after the IEP, depending. And when you're looking, you have to like listen to your gut. Do you think this proposed placement will meet your child's needs and address their goals? It's really hard to do, but try not to compare your child to the others in the class. Each child is unique, and student in the classes, they could have been together for a considerable length of time. So it's hard to see. You might think, oh, my kid's going to be an outsider in here, but those kids have worked together for 6-9 months maybe. And also remember that class populations change because new students are coming in throughout the year, depending on when they turn 3. So it's not an unusual thing to get a new student in March or a new student in October. It happens all the time. But the students that you see during your tour of the class might not be all the students in the class when and if your child attends. And also remember that teachers and aides can change from year to year, and so can class locations. So you want to focus on what the program is and what the, because you don't fall in love with the teacher. The teacher could be gone. And the location, it could be down the block from you when you look at it, and it could be moved across town by the time your child is ready to go there. You should be able to get an understanding of the learning environment and the structure of the class, the type of learning activities, the level and the type of staffing, and the type and extent of family involvement. We talked a little bit about, whether there's volunteering in the classroom. It's good to know what the ratio is. Is it, 3 to 1, 3 kids to 1 staff? Are there 12 kids in the class and are there 4 staff in it? Is there a lead teacher and 3 aides? What kind of learning activities are going on? When you walk into a classroom, and this is for, all the way on up through your child's career, school career, what's on the walls? Is it the kids' work product? Are they bare? What's the bulletin board look like? Is the schedule written out? Are there ways that you can tell that the kids are interacting both with each other and the teacher by what you're seeing in the room? You'll learn as you go in and you look at things, and you can use our parent observation guidelines for preschool programs. That's on pages 17 to 20 of our transition from early start to preschool services. Okay, so signing the IEP. As I said before, you don't need to sign at the IEP meeting. It's perfectly acceptable to take the time you need to review, reflect, ask and answer questions. You may not have had the opportunity to visit the proposed placement. You may not have had the opportunity to read through the assessments, and people understand that. The rest of the IEP team, they understand that. Most IEP team facilitators are not going to, force you to sign the IEP. They are going to track you down if you haven't signed it in 6 months, right? So if you're not going to sign it at the end of the IEP, you don't want to take too long. You want to attend to getting the questions answered that you need answered, and then go forth with starting the services. Because remember, services don't start until you sign. So you want to make sure that you feel comfortable with signing, but you don't want to take too long to feel comfortable. Also good to know that at the time you can consent to part, all, or nothing. And you can certainly take it home to read about it, as we talked. And maybe there was a need that was overlooked and you just can't think of it at that moment at the IEP meeting. But after you go home, you think about it and you might want to bring it up again. So you want to gather any supporting info you have, document your thoughts, prioritize, and maybe ask for another meeting. This one will probably be shorter. You're talking about one thing, but people understand that sometimes things go through the crack, that ever deepening, widening crack. So people understand. And you can always call the helpline and ask us to review the IEP with you, before, if you have assessments to share, or after, so you understand maybe what it is that you're signing a little bit better, because we can help coach you through that. And even after you've signed, the IEP you don't think is working because there's maybe lack of progress, or maybe the goals are too easy and they're met too quickly, and you feel like your child isn't being challenged enough. Maybe there's a related service that's needed but hasn't been offered. So you can request an IEP in writing, and the school should hold that meeting within 30 days. We talked about that already. We also talked about being aware not to call too many IEP meetings, because that's really not the most appropriate course of action. And you don't want to be calling an IEP meeting every month or every other month. I mean, you don't want to be the parent who cried wolf, right? You want to have IEP meetings when there's a need and something that needs to be addressed. So what do you do if after you go through this whole process, your child is not eligible for special education? Well, maybe you celebrate. Okay, maybe. But if you think your child does need that specialized instruction to access the general education curriculum, which is the definition of special education, disagree with the assessments and the eligibility decision. You can request what's called an IEE, an independent education evaluation, and that needs to be provided at public expense, meaning that another evaluator would come in and evaluate again. Now, double-edged sword, you get a second assessment that says the same things as the first assessment. Well, then, maybe your child really doesn't have the need to be in special education. Or you can watch and wait and document your child's learning and development, and you'll know soon enough whether things are going in the right direction or not. And please, if this happens, call Matrix for help, and we can certainly sit down and talk about everything with you. If there is conflict, we're big on beginning conflict resolution at the lowest level. So if you really feel like you're using effective communication, collaboration, and cooperation, and none of that is happening, the conflicts are not being solved, you got to be ready to climb that conflict resolution ladder. This Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution in Special Education is a wonderful website. It's a really good learning environment. They have lots of different modalities. There are written things, there are charts, there are videos, and it all talks about the resolving dispute at the lowest level and moving on up. You can call us to discuss and strategize. You can connect with the teacher, the principal, the district program manager, the special education director. Consider an IEP facilitated meeting. The IEP facilitated meeting, it's really, we like to say that's what all IEP meetings should be like, but there is, it's part of what's called alternative dispute resolution to offer an IEP facilitated meeting, where there's a person there, skilled and capable facilitators who assist the team in reaching agreement and always keeping a successful outcome for the students in mind. Many districts and SELPAs, they do offer this facilitated IEP. A lot of people, they don't talk about it though, so maybe you might want to ask that question, because that is a lower level of resolving conflict than, say, filing a state complaint or going to due process, which I don't want to talk about a lot here. We do have our procedural safeguards trainings. We have the next one coming up on November 16th that talks a lot about these remedies for conflict. But again, just remember, resolving conflict at the lowest level, it helps everybody out. So transition tips, how do you prepare your child? You can have a Q&A with your child. Encourage questions like, who will be at school? How will I get to school? Will you drive me? Will we walk to school? How long will I be there? How will I get home? What will you be doing while I'm in school? Will you miss me? I always remember that book. I always remember it now. I've forgotten the title of it, but it's The Kissing Hand, maybe, and the That's mom. Right. Thank you, thanks, Erica. The mom puts a kiss in the child's hand, and then the child could put a kiss in the mom's hand, and they both keep that kiss in their hand. And if they miss each other during the day, they can always hold the palm of their hand up to their cheek, and they can feel that that you're with them. And again, I didn't know that book when I sent my kid to preschool, but she was fine. I was the one who was more apprehensive. So you know your child best. You can talk with them, give them as little or as much information as you think is appropriate. You can show pictures of the actual school site, or at least what your child would do at school. You can visit the school. You can follow the route to the classroom. If the playground is accessible, you can plan outings to it. You can meet the teacher if possible and visit the classroom before the first day of school. I think a lot of preschool teachers are very accommodating to that. You can take pictures of the room and make a little booklet And if your child can't benefit from pictures, you can make a going to school story and tell it lots of times before the school actually starts. Lots of library books on going to school. Oh, there's the kissing hand. Yay, I already talked about that. And look for pictures about riding a bus to school if your child is going to do that. Get a toy bus for your child to work with, and gather the clothes or the special items for the first day of school. You know, make it a fun thing. It's a big change for the family, right? But, you know, more likely than not, it's going to go fine. You, like I said, like for me, you might be the one who's experiencing more of the apprehension. You know, will the teacher understand my child? Will they get the services they need and succeed? Well, if you've done that little one pager to try and introduce your child to the teacher, that'll help. If you've been an informed member of the IEP team and you've contributed to understanding the needs and the goals and the services and the placement, well, then there's a better chance that your child will succeed. If you've informed staff about what your child needs, when to stand back, when to let them try things on their own. If you're worried about them making friends and if they'll be bullied, you know, a lot of parents worry about that. So, you know, talk to other folks, you know, plan to do something for yourself during those school hours on the first days. Don't spend it all you know, running errands or working. Give yourself a break. And I also wanted to talk about potentially maybe going for coffee with some of the other moms you see at drop off, or getting involved in some kind of a preschool support group. Schools offer them. We have an online Spanish speaking early years support group. If we have enough interest, we'd be happy to start one English speaking. Let's see, we talked about the one-page summary. We talked about taking pictures. You can take pictures of the first day, leaving home and arriving at school. Oh, make sure if your child is taking a bus that you get that transport schedule, and make sure that the bus knows where the pickup is and you know what time it is, because you don't want that as a hiccup on the first days of school. And any extra special needs are covered at school. Any equipment, any diet or snack foods, a change of clothes maybe in the child's backpack would be a good idea. Keeping a tissue in your pocket and a smile on your face, and creating positive images in your head of your child doing well at school is helpful. You know, it's going to be a big change for you and your child, but, you know, call us. We're here to listen and we're here to talk about it. We also just wanted to put a little bug in your ear about getting involved as a parent, because never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So there's one thing about learning about your child's IEP and getting a handle on that first. I totally get that. But especially as you go on and your transition into the big school with kindergarten, but also when you think about preschool, think about how you can be up to date on special education issues and contribute to positive change and school reform. So if you feel like you do want to get involved at all, if you do want to try and make a change, consider looking at these community advisory committees, which are in every county, every school district. And first, let me backtrack and talk to you a little bit about SELPAs. So a SELPA is a state education local plan area. Another acronym you're going to want to need to know, right? It's a state mandated group that provides for all special education service needs of children living within its boundaries. So each region develops a plan describing how it will provide special education services. In some areas, the SELPA is the same as the school district, but often the SELPA involves all the districts in a county or a region, and they often serve as the fiscal agent, getting the monies from the state and then doling them out to the different districts, depending on how much money each district is getting. So you can check out the SELPA in your area. Here it is in the counties that we serve, those 18 counties in that slide in the beginning. Now, each SELPA is required to have something called a community advisory committee for special education, and its members are both parents and professionals. It's a collaborative partnership that's meant to improve and promote communication between schools, parents, and public agencies to increase the community awareness, facilitate parent education and support, and also to coordinate activities on behalf of children with diverse needs. So while CACs are a function of the SELPAs, they are not part of the school district. Though in some areas, like I said, the SELPA is the same as the school district, but that doesn't mean that the CAC is in the pocket of the school district. CACs are a group of concerned parents who want to learn about special education, keep up to date on everything that's happening, and have open dialogues, hopefully with professionals who attend these meetings as well. Sometimes special ed directors, most often the SELPA director will be there, or some program managers of the SELPA at the very least. And to remember, as we said, that self-care is not selfish. Transition is an intense experience, but it's temporary. Your child is going to change and grow, as will your feelings about transition. And if you try and embrace the moment, put out that welcome mat for it, appreciate every second with your young one, seek support both in navigating and the process, and support with your own emotions. Like I said about finding support groups, Erica and I have been involved in support groups on and off our whole careers with our children. And they really help. I have developed and maintained really good friendships. And I want to say with other moms, and it's not because dads, aren't also involved and couldn't also be involved. It's just that my relationships have been more with moms. But, like I said, after dropping off, go for a hike, get coffee, reach out. You'd be surprised how many people are going through the same things you're going through. We are our children's role models, and they watch how we manage our stress, our growth, and our change. So, you might have heard these things before, and, you can brush them off like I did for so many years, but really, parents of kids with needs, our cortisol levels run higher than others. I mean, it's just kind of a physiological fact. So how do you manage your stress? Are you getting plenty of rest? Are you exercising enough? Are you doing enjoyable activities just for yourself, even if it's 10 minutes a day? Are you eating healthy foods? Are you finding people who give you encouragement and hope, and kind of not letting those people in who are the, old Saturday Night Live reference, the Debbie Downers of the world? Your life probably has enough stress in it without inviting in outside stress. Try not to feel guilty about taking this time for yourself, this 10 minutes, this 20 minutes. Still, I practice mindfulness-based stress reduction. And still to this day, my daughter will approach me in the middle of it, and I kind of just hold out my hand, and she knows, okay, I'll give her 10 minutes more, kind of thing. But it's important. You deserve that. Matrix has facilitated, I have with a colleague of mine, these mindfulness-based stress reduction classes specifically geared toward parents of kids with needs. That's not what MBSR was always, but some professionals at Vanderbilt University took that and worked with parents and have a course specifically for parents. I'd like to be doing them again. It's not something that's easily transferable, at least for me, to do it online. I'd rather do it in person. So hopefully we'll be doing them, knock on wood, in the future. It's the best support group ever for everybody. And be gentle with yourself. Practice asking for help when you need it and for relief. If you do go into the provisional eligibility or Lanterman eligibility with the regional center, get in that respite program. I know that the military, which I didn't know before we did a deeper dive into military, they have a respite program. Just utilize the supports that are there for you to give yourself some time. Try and avoid being resentful and frustrated about things, and making care a self-habit early and often. So hop on in. The water's fine. Going to preschool is a big change, but more likely than not, if you prepare yourself and you plan with care, it'll be a positive experience for you and your child. Just a couple of references here, which again, you have the PDF. You can do a deeper dive if you like.